we can read when he is hanging on the cross, he quotes two Psalms. Psalm 22, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And Psalm 31, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And we don't know because the text doesn't tell us, but you have to wonder, did he dryly quote the words of the song, or did he sing them? These were hymns. These were the songs that they sung. Everyone would have known the tune. Was Jesus singing these from the cross? We don't know. I imagine that he did. They are songs after all. Welcome back to Come Follow Me with Fair. My name is Jennifer Roach Lees, and today we're talking about the Psalms. We're going to cover chapters 1 through 46, but I promise we are not going to go through all 46 chapters. The Come Follow Me curriculum breaks Psalms up into 3 sections. We're here in week 34, so weeks 34, 35, and 36 all cover the Psalms. I want to give you some information and some background that might make the Psalms have more meaning for you. So 1, to start off, we'll look at some interesting connections that you might not have noticed before between phrases in the Psalms and phrases in the Book of Mormon. In this section, I am heavily relying on an old academic paper from John Hilton III, published about 15 years ago. It's called Old Testament Psalms in the Book of Mormon. It's published through BYU's Religious Studies Center. You can find it on their website. It's very well footnoted. You could spend a lot of time in the footnotes. I certainly did. But here's the gist of his paper, and it's fascinating. John identifies more than 40 direct correlations from Psalms and the Book of Mormon. Most of these appear in the writings of Nephi and Jacob, which of course makes sense. They lived closest to the time of Jerusalem's temple worship and carried the brass plates, which likely included at least portions of the Psalms. From John's work, here are some of the examples. Psalms chapter 2, we get the phrase, a rod of iron. And of course, we get that in 1 Nephi 8. Psalms chapter 4, light of countenance. We get that in 3 Nephi. Psalms 5, give ear to my words. Several places in the Book of Mormon that's listed. Because of mine enemies, Psalms 5. It's in Psalms 27. It's in Psalms 69. John lists 43 of these that are kind of direct correlations. Put my trust in and deliver, Psalm 7, 25, 31. The phrase, none that doeth good, no, not one. We get Psalms 14 and 53. And on and on and on and on. It's a fantastic paper. You can go read the whole list of them. But why is this important? We can prove there are phrases in the Book of Mormon that also appeared in the Psalms. By the way, John has a very nice discussion in the footnotes on which Psalms would have been available when Lehi left Jerusalem. If you're curious about that, some are written before and some are written after he would have left. So at the very least, this shows that the Book of Mormon is deeply rooted in the same scriptural world as the Bible. The New Testament writers did the same thing. They draw on the Psalms to testify of Christ, and Nephi and Jacob do it too. A second reason why this is important is it matters because it highlights the continuity of worship. The Nephites carried with them this language of temple, praise, covenant, trust in God. All of this obviously carries into the theology that they have, and you find all those themes all throughout the Psalms. Those are probably some of the biggest themes in the Psalms. Second piece of background for you. The Psalms are occasioned, meaning they're not just abstract song lyrics written down in a notebook. They had reasons or occasions to be written. You know how you go to a concert sometimes and the singer will give you some insight into a particular song with something like, I wrote this song when I proposed to my wife, or I wrote this when my father died. And a person certainly can enjoy the song without knowing the occasion the writer composed it. But knowing the occasion, it does bring some insight. And many of the Psalms do this too. We have all these Psalms tucked away into their own little book, right? And rightly so. The Psalms are like the hymn book, right? So they're all put together. However, if the Old Testament were arranged completely chronologically, each psalm would be placed next to the story that it was happening in the background when that psalm was being written. Here's a few examples. Psalm 3. It's a very short psalm. It's just 8 verses. It's written by David. He writes many of the psalms, but not all. He's expressing trust that God is aware of him even when his foes are many. And we can pick all that up through the context. We can see David is going through something and he's expressing his trust in Heavenly Father. But behind the scenes, we know that he wrote that when his son Absalom temporarily ousts him from the throne. It's temporary, but his son performs a coup. And in Psalm 3, this is where David is writing his response to that situation. My enemies are all around me, but God is aware of me, and I trust that he is protecting me. Because his son was trying to overthrow him off his throne. That story plays out in 2 Samuel, 15 to 18, by the way, if you want to go see that. Your footnotes in your scriptures should always lead you to the stories. It's fun to follow them. Another example of Psalms being occasioned, Psalm 34. This psalm is actually an acrostic. The verses each begin with a letter of the Hebrew alphabet. You wouldn't pick that up unless you were reading it in Hebrew, but it would be just like a poem where the first line begins with A and the second line begins with B. So it's that kind of form. It blends praise and testimony and a little bit of instruction, and all on its own. It's a beautiful, lovely piece. But if you also read it understanding what David was going through, it's fascinating. The events are in 1 Samuel 21. And basically what happens is he has to pretend to be insane to escape one of his enemies. He has to do this sort of crazy, risky thing in order to escape danger. So when you go back and read Psalm 34, with that story in the background, David has just had to go through this huge production where he's acting like a crazy person, saying all kinds of crazy things. Psalm 34 is kind of this back to basics psalm, some truths about God and his care for us, his goodness and his faithfulness. Some of the lines, honestly, could be thought of as very basic statements, kind of like you might expect if you were reading a poem and each line started with A and then B and then C. It might take you back to your primary days of these are some fundamentals. And that's what David is doing here in 34 after he's gone through this incidents where he was acting like a crazy person. It's like he was reminding himself of what is true after having to play the madman. There are many, many more examples. Like I said, follow your footnote and you'll find all of them. All of that to say, the Psalms were written for real reasons that were happening in people's lives while they were experiencing all kinds of emotions. Most human emotions can be found expressed somewhere in the Psalms, including all of the worst emotions, feelings of betrayal and hurt and all the terrible things that we feel from time to time. And what the Psalms wonderfully do, this is their greatest strength in my opinion, is that they always turn the reader back to God's care. There's no denial of the bad situation that they're in. You'll see it over and over. My enemies surround me. And then the turn towards, but God cares for me. God sees me. God has my back. The writer, whether it's David or someone else, saying like, I'm frightened, I'm in danger, but I know that God is there. If you are ever in a place where you need reassurance in your life that God is with you, that he has not forgotten about you, Psalms is a great place to turn for that kind of comfort and reminders. Third, last piece of background I want to give you for Psalms. Psalms express the importance of covenants and temple worship in a way that is just obvious, like they just hit you over the head with it. So these psalms, these song lyrics, psalms essentially are the songs, they don't really come alive on the paper for us. We just read them as words. But they came alive for ancient Israel because they used them in their temple worship, among many other places. In the temple, the songs were performed with choirs and instruments, and sometimes even designated singers are listed in the psalm itself. Many psalms include like the musical notation, things like with stringed instruments or to the chief musician, kind of giving some notes on how the song is to be sung. It shows they were intended for public performance in the temple courts. Now, remember, temple worship back then looked very different than it looks for us in our day. So we don't regularly have choirs singing in our temples, but they did, especially in the court area. What happens in our Sunday services might be a closer picture for this if you need a way to imagine it. Psalm 30 was probably used at the dedication of Solomon's temple. The scriptures are introduced as, it says, a psalm, a song at the dedication of the house of David. And that is most often understood to mean the temple that David commissioned. It's ultimately built by Solomon, but it's Psalm 30 that was sort of the dedicatory song of that temple. Other psalms, for example, like 113 to 118, they are sung at Passover every year, even to this day, as a reminder of God's covenant with his people. These are still very alive and real in the rituals of Passover. Those songs are an encouragement that God does keep his promises. He does come and rescue. One great example, that probably just the best example of this, is how Christ uses one of these psalms. We can read when he is hanging on the cross, he quotes two psalms. Psalm 22, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And Psalm 31, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And we don't know because the text doesn't tell us, but you have to wonder, did he dryly quote the words of the song, or did he sing them? These were hymns. These were the songs that they sung. Everyone would have known the tune. Was Jesus singing these from the cross? We don't know. I imagine that he did. They are songs after all. But he himself, Jesus Christ himself, a member of the Godhead, is there on the cross rescuing his people. And the Psalms are an excellent source of celebration and recognition of God's work with humanity. All these things about temple themes and covenant themes that we find in the Psalms, that's exactly what all of this is about, is God's rescue of his children. And even at one point, Jesus Christ using them while he is performing the biggest work of rescue. So there you have it, 3 reasons why you should care about Psalms. They show a connection to the Book of Mormon. They establish the Book of Mormon as something that comes out of the biblical world. They help us see God's continued commitment to us. And they teach us things about covenants and worship. We have 2 more weeks in Psalms. Join me next week and the week after. We'll get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty with Psalms, and it'll be fun. See you then.